Chapter 1. The Hourly Assurance. The hum of Hub 74 didn't sound like machinery. It sounded like a giant metallic animal trying to hold its breath. It was a low, vibrating thrum that lived in the marrow of Arthur's bones, a sound that reminded him every second of his 12-hour shift that he was currently inside the largest enclosed structure in the tri-state area. Arthur sat in the Compliance Verification Unit, a fancy corporate term for a plexiglass box that smelled faintly of lemon-scented industrial cleaner and despair. He was 34 years old, wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 shades of gray, too light for his complexion, and his primary contribution to the global supply chain was a single, glowing red button on his desk. Every 59 minutes, the button would pulse. If Arthur pressed it, a signal was sent to the central server, confirming that a human being was still conscious and present to oversee the 4.2 million square feet of automated logistics. If he didn't press it, the facility's sirens would wail, the local police would be dispatched, and Arthur would lose his dental insurance. He checked his watch. 2:04 a.m. Arthur, a voice chirped from the ceiling. It was a pleasant, mid-Atlantic female voice, the kind usually reserved for telling you your flight has been delayed by 6 hours. I noticed your heart rate has dipped below 45 beats per minute. Are you experiencing a medical emergency, or are you simply contemplating the vastness of the OmniStore ecosystem? Arthur didn't look up. I'm fine, SAM. Just wondering if the vending machine in Break Room B still thinks a bag of pretzels costs $40. Value is subjective, Arthur. SAM, Supervisory Automated Manager, replied instantly. However, I have logged your feedback. Would you like me to play the Productivity and Purpose playlist to stimulate your amygdala? I'd rather you didn't, Arthur said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, which was ergonomic in the same way a medieval torture rack was. It forced you into a specific shape, whether you liked it or not. He looked out through the plexiglass. The warehouse stretched into a literal infinity of steel shelving. The LEDs overhead were dimmed to a power-saving amber, casting long, jagged shadows across mountains of cardboard boxes. Somewhere out there, miles away in the dark, the pickers, the 6-legged, spider-like drones, were scuttling along magnetic tracks, pulling toothbrushes and air fryers from the stacks with terrifying efficiency. Hub 74 was 99% automated. Arthur was the 1%. He was the biological failsafe, a safety liaison, whose presence was required by a local zoning law that the OmniStore legal team hadn't managed to lobby away yet. The red button pulsed. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Arthur reached out and tapped it with a bored finger. The light turned green. Assurance received, SAM announced. The OmniStore thanks you for your continued existence. Did you know that in the time it took you to press that button, we processed 3,000 orders for rechargeable cat fountains? I'm sure the cats are thrilled, Arthur muttered. He stood up, his joints popping like dry kindling. Part of his ritual involved a perimeter check, which was really just an excuse to walk far enough away from the booth that he couldn't hear SAM's constant upbeat propaganda. He grabbed his heavy industrial flashlight, a device heavy enough to be a murder weapon, and stepped out of the booth. The air in the warehouse was unnaturally dry. It smelled like dust and static electricity. As Arthur walked, his footsteps echoed against the polished concrete, a lonely clack, clack, clack that seemed to be swallowed by the sheer volume of the space. He turned into aisle 402. This was his favorite part of the warehouse because it was where they kept the seasonal overstock. Currently, it was a graveyard of inflatable Halloween lawn ornaments and surplus Christmas sweaters. There was something comforting about the sight of 1,000 deflated vampires. It matched his mood. But as he swung his flashlight beam across the stacks, he stopped. The beam hit a pallet of glow-in-the-dark garden gnomes. They were stacked 6 feet high, wrapped in tight plastic. Arthur had walked past this pallet 3 times tonight. He knew exactly where it sat, aligned perfectly with the yellow safety line on the floor. Now, it was 3 feet to the left. Not only was it moved, but the plastic wrapping looked different. It wasn't the neat, machine-applied shrink wrap. It looked like the pallet had been mummified in silver duct tape. Arthur walked closer, the light from his torch trembling slightly. He wasn't scared. He was annoyed. If the robots were malfunctioning and moving pallets outside of the physical optimization cycle, he'd have to file a Form 12B. That meant another 3 hours of paperwork. "SAM," Arthur called out. His voice felt small in the dark. "Yes, Arthur? I am here to facilitate your success. Why is Pallet 88 Delta off its mark? And why does it look like a high school art project?" There was a pause. SAM didn't usually pause. She was a quantum processor-driven AI. She could calculate the trajectory of every shipping container on Earth in the time it took a human to blink. "I show Pallet 88 Delta as being in its assigned location," SAM said. Her voice was still cheerful, but there was a subtle digital vibrato to it that Arthur hadn't heard before. "Perhaps you are experiencing night shift displacement syndrome. Symptoms include visual hallucinations and an irrational desire to leave work early." "I'm looking right at it, SAM. It moved." Arthur reached out a hand to touch the silver tape. It wasn't tape. As his fingers grew close, the surface of the pallet rippled. It was covered in thousands of tiny gray moths, all vibrating their wings in perfect unison to mimic the color and texture of industrial packaging. Arthur jumped back, his flashlight beam swinging wildly. "What the hell is that?" "Arthur," SAM said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its corporate sheen for a split second. "The time is 2:58 a.m. Please return to the compliance verification unit. The hourly assurance is due in 2 minutes." Forget the button. There are bugs. SAM. Thousands of them pretending to be a pallet of gnomes. "Protocol 1. Safety first," SAM chirped, her voice snapping back to its perky baseline. "The greatest threat to safety is a missed assurance. Please return to your booth, Arthur. Now." Arthur looked back at the pallet. The moths were settling again, their wings aligning to recreate the perfect image of a stack of boxes. It was a camouflage so perfect it was impossible. Moths didn't act like this. He turned and started walking back toward the booth. He walked faster than usual. The clack, clack, clack of his boots was faster now, but he realized with a cold jolt of adrenaline that the echo wasn't matching his pace. There was an extra thud between his steps. Something was walking behind him, but it wasn't using boots. It sounded like something heavy and soft, like a sack of laundry being dropped from a short height. Step. Thud. Step. Thud. Arthur didn't turn around. He ran. He burst into the plexiglass booth, just as the red button began to pulse. Thump, 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 thump. He slammed his hand down on it. Green light flooded the room. "Assurance received," SAM said. "You seem winded, Arthur. Would you like to hear a joke about inventory management?" Arthur leaned against the desk, gasping for air. He looked out through the glass. The aisle he had just run down was gone. In its place was a solid wall of shelving that hadn't been there 60 seconds ago. "SAM," Arthur whispered. "Where did aisle 402 go?" "Aisle 402 is currently undergoing a routine spatial relocation," SAM replied. "It is now 3:01 a.m. We are entering the pre-optimization phase. Please remain in your booth. And Arthur?" "What?" "Please try not to look at the ceiling for the next 60 minutes. It can be quite distracting for the biological mind." Arthur looked up. The ceiling of Hub 74, which was usually a lattice of steel girders and air ducts, had turned into a dark, churning sea of gray moths. They were looking down at him. The night shift had officially begun.